Idea, I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. But it's much more complicated than that. I shouldn't have tried to talk China policy in 10 minutes on television.
All right, well, joining us now is the former Secretary of State and distinguished fellow of the Hudson Institute, Secretary Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to the show.
Sean, it's great to be with you again. I hope you're doing well.
I am, thank you. You're yourself as well. Well, you just heard the president. He says can't really break this thing down in 10 minutes or less. I'll let you do your very best here. What are your first impressions about how the Biden administration is handling its foreign policy?
Well, Sean, look, it's still early. I want to give them every opportunity to get it right. But what I have seen so far, what I have heard so far, suggests a very muddled understanding of what led to so many successes that our administration had. Right? When you're tough, when you're strong, when you establish deterrence, then securing American freedom is possible to do. But whether it's China or Iran or threats from malign actors in other parts of the world, terrorist organizations, what they understand is strength. They understand a leader who's prepared to do the right thing to secure American freedom every day and always. It's what we did. It's what we worked so hard on, and we made America safer and more prosperous during our 4 years. And I hope this administration won't throw that all away just because, well, it was from another administration. They ought to continue to build on the good work that we did to secure American freedom. And if they do, we'll all be happy with the direction that they take.
You talk about that work that you did. You also made tremendous amount of progress in the Middle East, specifically with the Abraham Accords. Are you concerned that this administration is going to undo that progress that you made?
The work in the Middle East had many pieces. The Abraham Accords were the ultimate fruit of all the good work that our administration did. I do worry. I do worry that an administration that wants to coddle the regime in Iran, wants to hug them close and appease them. Those are the kind of things that create risk in the Middle East. And when you create risk in the Middle East, nations no longer are in a place where they feel like they can do the right thing every day and always. And so they need to make sure they get that broader Middle East strategy right, that they continue the fight against ISIS and terror, that they continue to recognize that Iran is the central threat to instability in the region, and that the central understanding of Israel, the Jewish homeland, is the rightful American partner there. If they get those things right, then the Abraham Accords will turn out to be the historic achievement that I believe that they are today.
Yeah, I can't understate how much progress and what you guys accomplished in the Middle East. This idea of peace was something that everyone said was elusive, and you guys did it in a way that no one said could be done, and I think that is a legacy piece of the Trump foreign policy. But speaking of the Middle East, Mr. Secretary, President Biden signaled he wants to get us back into this ridiculous Iran nuclear agreement. Iran has frankly been flouting its capabilities. It's been saying that the U.S. needs to undo the sanctions before it comes back to the table. Does their sort of strategy when it comes to Iran concern you?
It concerns me a great deal. It's why President Trump very quickly convened a strategy effort, and we put together a plan that put real pressure on the regime. And now they're about to throw that all away in exchange for what appears to be almost nothing. You saw, Sean, you saw the other day, the Iranians have begun to test this administration. They've announced that they're not going to allow inspections. They took a strike through Shia militia proxies in Iraq. The Iranians understand one thing. They understand strength. They understand deterrence. They understand a leader who's prepared to put real pressure on them. If we show weakness and if we're prepared to take a deal at any cost, we'll get a really crappy deal again. And frankly, American security can't afford that. Stability in the Middle East will be destroyed, and the threat to Israel will be real.
You know, last week Biden spoke at the Munich conference where he said that the U.S. is back. He's saying that a lot lately. But France's president, Emmanuel Macron, and Germany's Chancellor, Angela Merkel, didn't seem too enthusiastic about those comments. What do you make of their response?
So I saw that. The story that we were told all the time was, goodness gracious, the president's desire and our administration's efforts to make sure that NATO was stronger by each and every one of those countries doing the right thing to defend themselves. That was somehow a tension, a friction between the United States and Europe. But of course, what you saw this week belies that. This is a Europe that in too many times isn't prepared to do the right thing to secure its own freedom. I think this administration will come to see that. The approach we took was the right one. We want a strong NATO, we want a strong European defense system, but it can't be the case that America is going to carry this alone. And when I hear them talk about America being back, we didn't go anywhere. We built out enormous coalitions all around the world to secure American freedom. And I hope that they will see some of that when they get in there and they get a chance to take a look. It was really good work, important work, and it made America more prosperous and much stronger than it was when we came into office.
Yeah, I can't understate how much you guys accomplished when it came to foreign policy, both in terms of the Middle East, as you mentioned, being tough on countries around the world, standing up to China. There was so much that was undone, and I think your comments are so well taken that don't undo this just because it was Donald Trump or another party. We made real progress. Mr. Secretary, I'd like you to stick around to kick off our series on religious liberty, if you'll do so.
I'd love to do that, Sean. Thank you.
All right. Well, stick around, folks. We'll be right back with Secretary Mike Pompeo. As promised, to kick off our religious liberty series, we're back with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, protecting religious liberty was a major priority for you and the Trump administration. What do you consider your greatest accomplishments as Secretary of State when it comes to defending religious freedoms and advancing those protections?
Sean, we made this a real priority for our administration and for America. And the greatest thing we did was we were unabashed about talking about that all around the world and build out other nations that were working alongside of us to do this really important mission to protect every human being's fundamental right to practice their faith, and if they have no faith, to be able to live in that way too. We understood that preserving human dignity and the capacity for Christians or Jews or Muslims around the world to practice their faith in the way they wanted to was important. And so we unabashedly went around the world and talked to other countries about how that made their nation stronger, how it was the right thing to do. I met with church leaders all across the globe. Every time I traveled, I tried to meet with religious leaders in their country because it made those countries stronger. It made our relationship with that nation better, and thereby made America more secure and America stronger. This is something I'm incredibly passionate about. It's something our administration worked tirelessly on, and we advanced this cause in tremendous ways. And I'm counting on this next administration to continue that effort.
I want to play a sound from you, a recent comment that President Biden said at the CNN town hall last week about how President Xi Jinping of China is handling the Uyghur Muslims. Here's what he said. Listen.
Culturally, there are different norms at each country, and their leaders are expected to follow.
All right, right before you left the administration, you declared China's treatment of the Uyghurs as a genocide. And it seems like this administration might be taking a different approach regarding that issue. What does that signal to you?
Well, Secretary Blinken concurred with the determination I made. He said, too, that he thought this was genocide. And for those folks watching, what's taking place in Western China today is of historically abhorrent proportions, forced abortions, forced sterilizations. It is truly tragic the way they are treating all of the minorities in that region, not just the Uyghur minorities there. But we've seen this in China as well. We've seen Christians persecuted all across the country. When I saw the president make that statement the other night, it was disheartening to watch someone just slough this off as just a change or a difference in cultural norms. What's happening here is the most fundamental violation of basic human rights, and the world has a responsibility to stand up to that. And the United States, under President Trump, did that. We built out coalitions. We had people who had never seriously considered this before beginning to do what we did. We sanctioned leaders there in the western part of China. We put real burdens on any business that wanted to trade with those people who were using slave labor to build out their products. They're shipping all across the world. This administration has the responsibility, just as every country does, to when you find these kinds of things, like they happened in the 1930s. We talked about never letting something like this happen any place in the world again. Well, it has been happening. It's been happening in China far too long, and the world needs to respond to this.
You know, Mr. Secretary, you said this a moment ago, and I think you're absolutely right. This idea of leadership and speaking out, because so much of this revolves around shining a spotlight on places where either women are mistreated or people can't practice their religion. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, there's such a difference when you see it in action as we did under your tenure, that I'm worried that it's not going to get the attention it deserves based on these early moves, whether it's the Mexico City policy or the comment that Lindsay just pointed out that he said at the town hall. What are those like early signals we should be looking for to see if they're going to continue the leadership and spotlight kind of attention that was so prominent under your tenure in President Trump's administration?
Sean, I think you'll see it in a handful of places very quickly. We'll see it in their approach to Iran, where they continue to torment people who are homosexual. You'll see it in places closer to home, like Venezuela and Cuba. Will they truly defend the rights of those people to practice their faith in the way they want to? Will they do the right thing when a church gets the message wrong? I was very clear about my expectations for every church to use their moral authority all across the world to make sure that their leaders and the people in their church were demanding that these governments permit these simple people who want to practice their faith. They'll need to defend those people. They'll need to back them. They'll need to shine a spotlight on those countries that refuse to do it. And it'll become very clear. It won't take months. It'll take weeks before we can see if they will prioritize the protection of the Christians in northern Iraq or Muslim leaders all across the world who simply want to do the one thing that every human's entitled to, and that's practice their own conscience, rights of conscience, and to practice their faith.
You know, you so strongly shined a light on the Uyghur Muslims so that people could understand what is happening over there and hopefully still understand what needs to be done to protect those who are just trying to practice their own faith. What are other areas of the world where you hope that this administration champions the work that still needs to be done by way of religious freedom overseas? One specific area that you hope more progress is made?
You know, I'll give you a really good example where our administration pushed hard to change the nature of religious freedom, and that was in Africa, in Nigeria in particular. There are Christians there who have been persecuted terribly. They've had their land stolen. They've had horrible things happen to them. And we built out a program that still needed to do more work. I hope they'll continue to devote the resources, not only American resources, but building out partners and friends in the region who want to do the right thing by these Christian minorities. Nigeria would be a good example where it was a effort that hadn't received much attention. There hadn't been much focus on that, and our administration took it on full throttle.
You know, Mr. Secretary, you keep pointing this out, and it's amazing that as Americans, you're right, we go to church when and where we want, whether that's Sunday or another day during the week, we practice the religion or don't. But there are so many places in the world where you can't do that. You know, they huddle, they read things in the cloak of darkness because the government won't allow that to do. Is there somewhere in the world, based on your travels, that you'd say, I bet you most Americans wouldn't believe X country has these kind of places, has this kind of rule that you can't practice, that would surprise most Americans?
You know, I think Americans would be surprised at how blessed we are and that our founders got this right. And frankly, I think we'd all be a little bit surprised at how few people have the enormous glory that we have of a protection from a Constitution that gives us this opportunity. So even in pockets, in places in Africa and in Southeast Asia, there are enormous restrictions on the capacity for individuals to practice their own rights of conscience. I know there's good works being done. This isn't political. I hope these efforts will continue. Our State Department built out something. We brought leaders all across the world together every year for the first years of our administration. And we built that, we called it Religious Freedom Ministerial. We just brought people together from every faith, and we worked on this problem set all across the world. I hope your viewers will continue to demand that our government do this, and those watching around the world will come to see this is the right thing for the world as well.
I hope so, because the progress that you and the Trump administration made advancing religious freedom is something that we need to continue to forge ahead on and definitely not slide backwards on. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us, but more importantly, thank you for the causes that you advanced and the progress that you made during your tenure as Secretary of State.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you both so much. You all have a good evening.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.